Hi guys. So till now we saw controller layer and service layer. Although service layer is not fully done, but skeleton is ready. Now before we move ahead with other functional components, let's develop a robust exception handling framework in our application. So let's see the problem we were facing earlier, right? So if I provide title as empty, my application is throwing 400 bad requests, but nowhere it is mentioned that I have an issue in title, right? So how we can fix it? So we need to override this default behavior of the Spring Boot so that we can capture what issue we have in which field, and then we can create a generic response so that user can also understand what problem they have in their payload. Okay. So for that, let's create a exceptional subpackage first. Exception. Okay. Now, how we can override this behavior? So there is a concept of controller advice in Spring Boot or Spring. What is controller advice? Controller advice, you can say it's a big brother of all the controllers. So if you want to have a common functionality in your all the controllers, you can define it in a controller advice. So let me create a similar controller advice for exception handling with the name generic exception handler. Okay. Now, as our controllers are also REST controller, right? So this controller advice should also be a REST controller advice. Okay. So we need to extend one, not this one, response entity exception handler class, right? So this is an abstract class. We need to extend this. Why we are extending it? So that we can get one method that we need to override. We can override all these methods, but as of now, I don't require it, right? So which method I am more interested in? This one, handle method argument not valid exception. Why? Because whenever this bad request occurred, this particular method gets executed, right? So I can override this behavior and I can create my own response entity in my way. Okay. So first of all, I need to grab all the errors that I have in my model. So for that, I can use this ex get binding result. Okay. Then get field errors. Okay. Then I need to collect in toMap. So I will using collectors dot toMap. My key will be field error get field. Okay. So this is nothing but it will return a string and it is nothing but my field name, which field has issue. Okay. And second is my value. So value is field error dot get default message. Okay. So in this way, I will be getting my field name and the particular app. So if you see this is complaining why, like it says function may return null, but it is not allowed here. What? So let's go to this toMap. So where is this value mapper? And if I go to, you see this require non-null. So that's why my IntelliJ is complaining. So solution is very easy. Just cut it. Use optional of nullable and wrap this value and give a default value. So for our case, let's give a default value. Okay. Although for our case, this will not be executed because we will always have a error message. But yeah, now I got my field name and the particular error that I'm getting. Okay. So let me import it. Now, if you see my return type is response entity, right? It is similar to my REST controller. So simply what I can do, I can simply say response entity dot status because I need to provide a bad HTTP status as well, bad request. And then in the body, I can directly provide this errors. Okay. So if I restart my server, okay, and re-execute it, now user getting what issue they have in their payload. So title length must be between 3 and 50. Okay. But there is one problem. So if you remember, when we were creating app HTTP response, I said we should have a consistent response even if we have a issue, right? So if I go to this app DTO HTTP app HTTP response, so I have a generic response for success response. But for error, I said earlier as well, I will be creating a variable. So let me create it. Private error detail. Okay. And let me create this error detail class as well. Error detail. Simply, I need error code. Okay. Error message. And one more additional error message, just in case if I want to provide more context to the problem. Okay. Now, just use data annotation, at the data Lombok annotation, so that I will be getting do string equals high score and everything. Similar to this success, let me create one more method error. It will take this error detail. Okay. Instead of set data, it will be set error details, error detail. Okay, and status is ship. Okay, and yeah, rest everything is fine. Again, go to generate exception handler. So rather than directly passing this error as body, let me create a app HTTP response of error. Okay, I need to create the error detail. So let's do one thing. So I will use @builder Lombok annotation. So in case you are not aware what it is, so we have a builder design pattern, right? So Lombok provides this facility just by annotating your class with @builder, you get a basic builder pattern implemented for your class. Okay. So, and what is the benefit? So basically I can do error.builder. Now I can I can set my error code. So let's say this ERR1 for now. Error message, let's say invalid input provided. And additional error message, I want errors dot to string. Okay. Now I can just cut it and paste here. Okay, let me remove extra spaces. Now if I start it and execute once again, now I have a consistent behavior, right? So status is failure, data is of course null, and error details error code ERR1, error message input not provided, invalid input provided, and additional message like what was the issue. So now why I have created this ERR1, maybe you guys are having question. So in most of the application, it is required that you have a business code for all your error. Why? Because let's say once your application is in production, you guys will be having L1 or L2 support team, right? So there will be certain SOPs like standard operating procedure where you will be defining all these error messages and what action need to be taken in if that error occurs, right? So that's why it is, most of the time you will be creating this kind of error code in your application. Okay. But as you know, in mostly in Java application, we don't define a hard-coded string for this, right? So we don't provide this hard-coded string like this. So what is the solution? We create a constant. But rather than creating a constant, let me create a enum. Okay. And benefit of creating enum, you will gradually know like why I'm creating it. So in the model, in the enums, let's create a or let me create a enums folder in the exception because we are dealing with the exception. So let me create a enums sub package and then define a enum name. Let's say error code. Okay. What I want in my error code enum? I want basically the error code, my error message. Okay. And this status as well I want to have. So the private HTTP status. Okay. Now I can create my first exception or error, invalid input. Okay. I can say ERR1 and let me copy it. This invalid input provided, copy paste, and then HTTP status dot pipe request. Okay. Okay. Why it is compared? Because I don't have a constructor. So creating a constructor is very simple. Just use this required R constructor of Lombok. Okay. Why it is incomplete? Let is check invalid input provided. Okay. And let me define it as final. Okay, now error is what? So this might be the new annotation you are saying what it is. So most of the people might be feeling what this required a constructor. It is a new annotation I'm using. So for now, just remember, like if you have a final variable in your class or enum, you can use this required constructors. So now I can use this invalid input here, get HTTP status here, dot get error code, get error message, and my additional error message is fine, right? So this is how you will be creating this errors and runs. So this is Jakarta validation, how you will handle. But in your application, you will be creating some custom exception, or you will be throwing some custom exception. So for example, if I go to my services, so let's say user provided some random ID 123, and I don't have task corresponding to that task ID. In that case, you will be throwing an exception, task not found exception, right? So we need to handle that as well. Now, again, this is my opinion, and most of the time I saw in that way only. You don't really create a hard-coded exception like task not found exception or some AVC exception. Why? Because this is kind of hard coding and there is no generic behavior, right? And we always we always try to create a generic things in our application, in our enterprise application, right? Okay. So for that, I will be creating some exception classes. First one is my app exception generic class. Okay. This will be my abstract class because I will be having child class. I will have error code that enum I already created, so I don't need to have error code and error message again and again. I can reutilize that enum. Then a additional error message. Okay. So a structure is more or less similar to my error details that I created in my DTO. Okay. Now I need some constructor. So as this is a abstract class, so constructor will be protected rather than public. Okay. App exception. First constructor I want to create is of error code only. So this dot, let me just finalize this constructor. And this, I don't think I need to finalize this, or let's do one thing because these will be final variable only. So let me define it. So additional error message, no. Okay. And one more thing, I need to extend runtime exception so that, I mean, if I'm not extending this runtime exception, then this is nothing but a simple class, not an exception class, right? So that's why I'm extending runtime exception. But whenever you extend your runtime exception, you need to call super constructor as well, right? So let me pass the error message. Okay. Second constructor I want to create, you might already guess, with additional message. Okay. Copy this and paste it here. Now, in case I want to provide this additional error message, what I can do, I can use like %s, comma %s dot formatted. First one is error code dot get error message, and then additional message. Okay. Now, third one, I want to create a constructor with cause as well. Okay. So that I can use this cause to pass in my super constructor. Okay. Now, if I go to runtime exception, there are lots of constructor that you might want to override, but for me, I think these are sufficient. Okay. Now, why I had created this abstract app exception? Okay. So as I said, we should have a generic behavior, and this is a REST application. So in any REST application, you will have only two kind of exception or errors. One is client exception, and second is server exception. What are client exception and what are server exception? So in technical terms, if I say if your HTTP status code is 4xs, then that is your client exception. That means your client or end user made the mistake. And if your HTTP status is 5xs, let's say 500, 503, then it is not an end user mistake. There was something wrong with your server itself, right? So we use this terminology like client exception and server exception in this context. So let me create this two child class quickly. App client exception. Extends app exception. And then I need to create constructor matching my superclass. And this is my concrete class. So I need to have a public here. Okay. Similarly, I need to create a apps server exception. Extending app exception. Again, create constructors. Change it to public. Okay. Now, go to app exception and use @getter so that I can get this error code and additional bus. Okay, now go to your service IMPL and let's throw this exception. So throw new app client exception. Let me create an error code for task not found. Let's okay, and let's say error2. So that means it should come after invalid. Okay, let me replace it with comma. Task not found. And if something is not found, then what is the HTTP status? Not found. That means 404. Okay. Now copy this and go to your service class. Use this error code. Just import it. Like so. Okay. Let's restart. And let's try to with this get TPO. Okay. With any random ID. Okay. Wow. I'm getting internal server error. Why? Because I don't have any handling mechanism for this kind of exception, right? And we want a generic behavior. First of all, it should be 404 rather than 500, and it should have a generic structure like status is failed, what is the error and all. Okay. So how we can do that? Simply go to generic exception handler, create a public method, response entity, object, handle app exception. Okay. So this will be taking exception. What is this T? This T is nothing but whatever extend app exception. So this is generic in case, right? Okay. And one more thing, whenever you create a method inside this generic exception handler, you need to annotate that custom method with exception handler and pass what kind of exception it will be handling. So it will be handling only the app exception, the custom exception that we have created. Okay. Now we need to create a similar behavior like this. So maybe I will copy this. Okay. Here it will be it will give me get error code dot get HTTP status. Okay. Again, I need to copy this and paste here and additional error. So additional error will be ex dot get additional errors. Okay. Now if I restart and re-execute, now I'm getting a consistent behavior, right? Status failure. My response code is 404. Error code is 2. Task not found. And additional error message because I was not providing additional error message. So that's why I'm not getting. I have handled this method argument not valid exception. I have handled my known exception, like if task is not found by a particular ID, I will have a not found exception. But what if our application code consists of an issue that is not handled properly, right? So one of the example is null pointer exception. So sometime we expect something, but we get null data, and if we are doing something with that data, we get a null pointer exception. That can be categorized as the unhandled exception. That should be very rare. I mean, you should not get any unhandled exception in your application 99.99% times. But we cannot guarantee like we will not have an unhandled exception, but we should have a proper mechanism to give a proper response in those cases as well, right? So first, let me throw a unhandled exception. And throwing an unhandled exception is very simple. Just let's create a string a null and just call a toString method. Okay. Now, if I restart it and try to delete anything, 1, I'm getting an unhandled exception, right? Now, handling these exception is also very simple. Similar to this handle app exception, create a one more method and name it as handle other exception. Okay. So all my custom exception will be handled by this method. But in case there is some unhandled exception that I'm not expecting, those will be handled by this method. And again, I need to provide which exception I need to handle here. So exception, I can place exception here and let me remove this. So now this exception will not have get error code because it is not a custom exception that I have created. So HTTP status, I will be providing HTTP status dot internal server error or. I already created this error code enums. Okay. So let me create some unknown exception here as well. Let's see ERR0 because this is rare of the rare exception that I'm expecting. Let's say something went wrong. Okay. And the HTTP status is internal server error. Okay. Now I can use this in my generic exception handler. So unknown dot get HTTP status. Again, unknown dot get error code, get error message, and additional message for now I don't want. Okay. Now if I restart the server and execute it, I'm getting a consistent behavior like status failure, error code error 0, something went wrong, and additional message not provided. Okay. Now, one thing, let me just reset it. Again, let me execute it. This message is fine. I'm getting a 500. That is also fine. But nowhere I'm getting what was the issue. For our case, what was the issue? Issue is this A is null. But in my log or as well as in the user response, I'm not getting what is the actual issue. So how we can fix that? So fixing that is very easy. We can just simply log all the exception that we have. Okay. And how to log something in a Spring Boot application, that is also easy. So I might be creating a separate video on logging and tracing in a Spring Boot application. But for now, just understand like logging is very simple in a Spring Boot application. Just use this Lombok annotation SLF4J. Okay. So you see this import lombok.action.slf4j. So this is not like a Spring Boot functionality. It's a Lombok functionality, right? So just annotate this with @slf4j. Now you get a variable name log. Okay. Then you can use this error and you can say x.get message and the actual exception that offer. Okay. Similar line I need to put everywhere. So rather than creating this log.error in every method, let me create a method which will return me this body. Okay. So let me create a method quickly. Okay. So my generic method is ready, build error response, and let me use this method everywhere. Okay, so let me restart. Now I'm getting a proper log, like cannot invoke string.toString because A is null and where this issue is occurring, deadline number 30. So one small thing, like as we have a separate folder or separate package for all the models, rather than creating this app exception and enums in this exception package, we need to create it in a model. So let me just fix that, a package exception, and then copy this enum to this exception, and this app client exception into not enums into exception directly, and this app exception again and the app server exception as well. So yeah, now it is fine.